Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast with your host, Tracy Hayes. Another amazing story from an agent producing at a high level. She most recently spoke at the California Association of Realtors event, Woman Up. She has been an agent for nearly 17 years. When she asked me why I was inviting her on the show, I said, 1, you're a top producer. 2, you have a story, because you don't get invited to a conference like that unless you have an inspirational story. Let's welcome this determined, inspirational woman who has overcome great adversity in her life and now stepping out, thriving, Amy Powell of Engel and Volkers. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tracy.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you. I stole that, the stepping out, thriving. That was somewhere in, I think it was in the Woman Up advertisement there. That was kind of like the theme of the conference.
Panel.
Yeah.
That was the panel that I spoke on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to start off a little bit there. I normally start off where you're from, but we'll get there in a moment because I think to kind of give a background, a foundation to our discussion today, and in your story, inspirational, and right up from what's got you in. Obviously, we'll talk about real estate and what you're doing there to keep your production high. But tell us a little bit about Woman Up. What was that panel? What was the goal of that panel? What were they trying to express? Who else was on the panel?
Okay.
Yeah.
Woman Up is a national organization. It started with the California Association of Realtors. So this is a conference, and there were people from all over the country. It's to support women in business and leadership. And I was invited to speak on a panel, and the topic of the panel was overcoming adversity and stepping into thriving. And I was on the panel with 2 other people. And so we were interviewed and basically, talked about our background and what the adversity was that we had to overcome, kind of what happened, what it was like, and where we are now.
So just give us an idea of a couple of the other people in the panels and what was kind of their backgrounds.
One of the ladies owned brokerages and had been in business at a very high level, luxury homes, and made a ton of money, and had some things that went wrong in her business, and no fault of her own, but basically had to start over. And then the other lady had a difficult upbringing and dropped out of school, I think in, middle school to take care of her family.
Right.
And I think she's the treasurer of the association. So it was just a few women that seemed to have good stories,
right?
Really had some challenges to overcome.
I can only imagine, just in conversation that we've had, I saw a little clip of your show. There was probably some tears in this crowd. I can imagine they were bringing out some emotions in some people.
Tears and cheers.
Yeah. So, what an honor, though, I can imagine, there are probably thousands in that audience there and get that kind of exposure, because I can imagine the California Board of Realtors is pretty large, and they're going to draw in for an event like that. So let's step back. Let's go back to my normal routine.
Okay.
Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Atlanta. My dad got a transfer to Houston when I was a child. So I moved to Houston, grew up there. Then in my early 20s, I moved to New York City. I worked at Bloomingdale's on 59th Street. I did makeup for a few years. And then I moved back to Atlanta as an adult. I was in property management at 18.
Oh, wow.
So I did that. So I had a little bit of background there. And then...
Is this like working for a family friend or something? Or
no, I worked for a property management company.
When you got hired?
At 18. Well, I started working at 13. So I had plenty of job experience by the time I was 18. So I left New York City, moved to Atlanta, got married, had 3 babies. I worked for national home builders. I worked for Pulte Homes and D.R. Horton Homes for a few years. And then... I
did not see that on the LinkedIn. Was that prior? Is this prior to 2005?
This was in mid 90s, late 90s.
Okay, because you're
I'm
LinkedIn.
dating myself.
Your LinkedIn didn't go back for. Yeah, you are probably just a year or 2 younger than I am. So. We moved to Jacksonville, Florida at the end of 2004, and I had 3 little ones under the age of 5, and I wasn't quite ready to go back to work, but I had to go back to work, and I got my real estate license in
in Jacksonville. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know my way around. And I started working for a company. And at that time, like, the market was hot and people were making money. So that was not the time to
You're
try
pre-2008.
Yeah. So they said, the company I was with said, Amy, we'll give you 5 newspaper ads per week. You can put your picture in there. You can borrow listings, and market those. And we don't know what we don't know. So I was kind of, young and dumb. And this lady said I could borrow her listings. Not only did I borrow her listings, I also took her tagline and put it in the newspaper. So I've got my picture, her listings, her tagline, and then she was a little upset. I didn't realize what I had done. And I just went out and door knocked at that time. Started getting business that way.
Tell us a little, because obviously we had a good discussion pre-show. I mean, your determination on the door knocking, because I don't think, I know there's a lot of agents that might be listening to this and they've started in the last 3 or 4 years. And the fact, you would drop off in the neighborhood and you were determined, and then I don't know, you didn't know why 23 was the number. I mean, maybe Michael Jordan was your, I don't know, someone was fine. Well, 23. You had to knock on 20, have 23 conversations.
Conversations.
Actually.
I knocked on
doors,
many more doors than that. Yeah.
Yes. So, role play a little bit. Like, what would be your norm? What would be that conversation? If I answered the door, yes. Hey, how can I help you? You're standing there. How would you open that?
Well, it depended on my mood for the day. There was one time a guy opened the door and I told him he won a sweepstakes. I was, and that kind of broke the ice a little bit, but it was kind of awkward. And when I started doing it, people didn't have all the cameras that they have now. So, and my thought was, I'd rather be rejected by somebody that I don't know than somebody that I do know. And I would go up to the door and knock on it, and I'd have, my little business cards and a little notepad, and I'd say, hi, my name is Amy Powell. I'm a realtor with this company, and I just wanted to see if you might know of anybody that's thinking of making a move, anybody that's looking to buy or sell. And I would offer them information and say, hey, do you want me to stay in touch with you? I can send you some information, blah, blah, blah. And I started getting calls for listings after that. And it was working. I remember one time I was out with a friend who went door knocking, and we got escorted out of the neighborhood. But, I've never had a problem with, like, hustling, cold calling, kind of like no fear. Just do it.
Well, we know it's Northeast Florida. It's Florida. It's hot. I mean, I can just imagine my determination be like, how fast can I do this, right? How fast can I have 23? But you have 23 conversations. You're going to be out there for a few hours.
I was out there for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was hot.
Yeah.
It was hot.
I can only imagine. I mean, that kind of determination. So those people started referring, or maybe they were go, hey, and I still had your card, and so forth. I'm going to step back a little bit because we kind of jumped forward. You went quickly through your thing. I had on there from your LinkedIn, San Jacinto. Is it
San Jacinto College?
Yes.
Also known as Harvard on the Highway. That was a junior college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you? Did you just go to college just to go to college? Did you kind of have like, hey, I want to do this? What did you have? What was in your mind?
Well, I had been working since I was 13, so I had a lot of work experience. I was never very studious. People would say Amy's very sweet, but she doesn't apply herself. And,
until she knocks on 23 doors.
Yeah.
That's 23 conversations.
So my dad gave me $300 to go sign up for college. So I went to the junior college. I think I went for about a semester. And I'm trying to remember so I was working in property management, and I was working at Steak and Ale at night. I got an apartment, and I went to college for a little while, but it just wasn't really, for me. Right. So I do not have a college degree, but I'm a self-starter. I read, I listen to podcasts, I go to conferences, whatever I can do to better myself, I do.
Well, it seems you had a work ethic from an early age. You start, you you started working at 13, and you're talking about working in restaurants. Anyone who works in restaurants, I mean, if you do it for any length of time, you've got to have a work ethic. That is a tough, road to hoe there, so to speak. Whether you're just waiting tables or bussing tables or all the above, washing dishes, it's a tough business. You have to have a work ethic. When did you start? Because I'm big in the personal development. I think all of us have an aptitude level. Some others are higher than others. And what we make is determined by our aptitude level. The people who win the lottery a lot of times are broke a few years later because they don't understand how to handle that kind of money. For you over the time, and we're getting into some details of your struggles, but to where you're at today, when did you really start like, hey, I really do need to read? Is that something that came natural to you early, or was there some time in your life and your?
Honestly, I think that when you're young, hanging out with people, they'd and I remember after my husband and I bought our first house, we were living in a neighborhood with a lot of other young couples, and the discussion around the barbecue pit was always like, who's your college football team? Where'd you go to college? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was very insecure about that.
Right.
On the other hand, I was making phenomenal money for my age with no formal education, working for these home builders, versus my friends in the neighborhood who had tons of student debt and were making a fraction of what I was making.
Right.
But having to answer that question and being so insecure about not having a formal education, it might have been a way to overcompensate for that, to kind of like, so I just had to do it myself. And
I like that. I like that a lot. Go on, finish, because I'm going to say something.
So, and we're the sum of the 5 people that we spend the most time with.
Right.
And I've always liked to, I listen to Tony Robbins. I listen to, there's a guy from Success Magazine, like all these people, and I just that's what I do. I still do it.
Well, you bring up a couple of good points, and I'm going to go in reverse order. That last statement. The whole premise on surrounding yourself by 5 successful people doesn't mean they have to physically be with you. You are engaged in Tony Robbins or any of John Maxwell's, who I like to read his stuff. Those, you're putting them in your circle. You may never meet Tony Robbins, but you're listening to everything he says, and you're taking it all in. He's now part of your makeup. And that's really what that means. Surrounding yourself by 5 successful people could be some people physically, but for most people, it is the only way to really do that is whether it's a podcast or their videos or their audios or their books, obviously, to surround itself. But you said something there now, because I went off on that tangent and made my mind lose the first thing that in reverse order. Oh, you were talking about being in that party situation or social situation.
Right.
And you're around these people who have a degree, they have a piece of paper. And you compensated by starting to kind of do some reading. And I think that we could take a survey, and I guarantee the majority are going to say they got through college reading the minimal amount of books, if they even read an entire book, took the cliff notes, whatever, and got through college. And the fact that now you're around those people, I guarantee there was 7 out of 10 of those people were probably like that you were surrounding yourself with. And now you're actually reading books. You actually have huge power, because I think that's what it gives you. It gives especially a lot of verbal ammunition, but it gives you inspiration. You start, and you're probably changing the conversation because you're starting to talk about what you read. Yeah,
and if I can be very honest with you, I think that because of the way I grew up, the resources I had growing up, my background, it probably originated from a place of insecurity and just trying to be able to hold my own in these situations. And it served me well. But, and there were a lot of times that I just didn't feel like I belonged in a situation because I didn't have a college degree. I didn't come from a family that could provide all of that stuff. So it...
you innately compensated.
I figured it out, man.
Yes, you figured it out.
That's what you do. You figure it out.
You figured it out, and obviously you can look at hindsight. That's what I see. And then when that story, I'm like, this girl, she grabbed books, and now she could carry on a conversation, because you could say, hey, did you read that recent novel by blah blah blah, or hey, and they're like going, I haven't read a book since. Yeah. It does. But I always remember some of the initial interview questions. Different jobs, like, hey, what book have you read recently? A lot of people don't ask that anymore. But that was something, 20 years ago, going to an interview, like, hey, have you read a book recently? And I challenged that person. I said, what book have you read recently? Right. But it does add power, and I think it's part of you now.
Yeah.
From that
I
standpoint.
love to learn.
So in the mid-'90s, you're working for the builder, and I think that was in Atlanta, if I recall from your story. Okay, so you have a little taste of real estate at this time. Now, did you had your license at this time? Did you require a license?
I went to real estate school, but at that time you couldn't have a license because I guess Pulte and D.R. Horton were not brokers at the time. So if I had a license, it had to be inactive. So I had some knowledge from the course, but I was really a salesperson working for the builders.
Yeah, I think different states
Yeah.
handle it different ways, whether or not you have to be an actual agent if you're working, in the model site agent type stuff. But you're working like an agent. So you're in there, you're doing what it takes. So you're getting a taste. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit to about, you're here now in Jacksonville, 2004-05 period. You go and get your license.
Yes.
You choose the first brokerage. What led you to them?
Because my background was working as a site sales agent, I wanted to do site work as a site agent here, and that's when the condos were a really big deal. People were buying a lot of condos, like a couple of them. So I went to a company called Lifestyles Realtors. That was kind of the place to be at that time. And the person that I interviewed with, I told him I wanted to, work in a condo building, selling that way. And he said, I need you to go out and get 6 months of residential real estate experience first. So I don't know if that was the reason or, what it was, but I had 3 little ones at the time. So by the time I dropped them off at their little pre-K and got started, it was basically time to turn around and go pick them up again. Right. So I started selling general real estate. And then after you do that for a few months, I'm starting to get some traction, get some things going. But I didn't know what I didn't know.
Now, were you still working for them, but just on the outside?
Yeah, I was working. I was working for Lifestyles Realtors, but I was selling general real estate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine the. In the '90s, I was in Northern Virginia, and me and my cousin, we worked closely. He did the flooring, worked for a flooring company of the builder, where they were upgrading the flooring and so forth. But I noticed, when the top agents, site agents, they always wanted to work in the townhome subdivisions because they were going multiple deals all the time. It was the very new green people. They would put in at that time, a $500,000, $600,000 home in northern, and outside DC is probably worth $2 or $3 million today. But they put the newbies in there because they would, if they sold one a month, they were like, but the townhomes, they were rolling that all day long. Yeah. So I can imagine when you went there and said, hey, I want to go in that condo you guys represent, they probably had some other senior agents that probably were like, no, we're in there. Yeah. We like coming into the comfortable air-conditioned office. We don't like knocking on doors.
Yeah.
So you start rolling here a little bit, right? How tell us a little bit about you getting started. I mean, like you said, you're juggling the kids before and after pre-K. Tell us the challenges you had and what were some of the successes.
Okay, so I moved here in 2004, got my license in 2006. Still my kids are like kindergarten and under, so they're very young. I don't know my way around. I don't have a network. I don't know anybody. and I'm just having to figure it out. So I started with the door knocking, and then I was doing open houses, and then I was getting a few listings. And at the time, the company was like in Avondale, Riverside, and I got stuck in this very low price point. And it was hard. It sucked, actually. I was stuck in a very low price point.
We're on a podcast. You can say that.
And I just remember, sometime there was one day I was like, I am not going home until I get a listing.
Right.
And I drove around. I was like psycho driving around looking for sale by owners, and I got one. I mean, I was determined. I will say I was determined.
That's awesome.
So I got a listing, and then, got another listing. And so it was small, low volume, but I was getting some traction. And as I started to build my business, then 2008 happened. And I wasn't able to do a lot of business because really I was a mom that had to take care of these kids.
Yep.
So that took a lot of time. But when I did work, I worked hard. And then, the market tanked. And it was like the lights got turned off for everybody. Yeah. And I was so busy trying to serve other people and sitting across the kitchen table from somebody who's like desperate, sad, getting a divorce, they're losing everything. And all the stuff I was working was short sales, so I didn't have any income coming in. And, financially it was really difficult. And, we made a lot of decisions that we just didn't know what we didn't know. So during that time, I'm helping everybody else with their stuff and realize I'm in the same situation. So we did a short sale on our home. I mean, it was just a tough few years. But if I got my start and it was that difficult, as things started to turn, it was so much easier.
I mean, you must have been, as I think, if you've been in the real estate business long enough, now you're coming into a downturn in 2007, 8, whatever, you're rolling in there. There comes some days where you're like, man, am I doing the right thing? Should I stick with this? I mean, I imagine you reached that point several times. I mean...
I did, but I love helping people so much that I was doing it because I cared about people and I wanted to help people, not pay, and I was married at the time and we had another source of income, so it worked out okay.
Right.
But I don't know what other job I would have done.
I mean, because you can help people in a lot of different things. It goes back to you only know what you know, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't know of something else to do.
Yeah.
You were kind of totally focused.
Well, and again, without having a college degree, and I've always been in sales, what else was I going to do?
Right. That could bring in the revenue. I mean, there's a lot of other sales jobs there, but you may have had a lot of sales, but they would only bring you the same amount of money. You just had sales those short sales could, they could close in a month, or they could close in 6 months or 12 months or never close.
Right.
Depending on the bank you're working with. So that might have been actually the good part. You didn't know what but not having the college degree, you didn't feel you could get out. You're now into this 3 or 4 years, and you don't want to throw that part away. So that's interesting. But I also was just thinking about you were talking about your start and how you were out there door knocking. You were determined. The few hours you had of the day where you could, when your kids were in daycare and stuff, to get out and actually work. But you were working really hard and focused on it. And it's kind of like training. You work and you're pumping the weights. You're running the miles, and then the actual race or the actual game is easier because you worked so hard. And what I'm seeing here is, again, a lot of people are reflecting back in just the last couple of years, and everything's been just, falling off the trees. You didn't actually. I mean, it was good in 2005 and 6.
But I was still new.
You were new, and you were working through that part.
Yeah, I'm learning. I was learning.
Yeah. So you had that challenge of learning to go. That when it got a little tougher, it wasn't. Yeah. I mean, it was tough, but you were already tough.
I was already tough.
I mean, plus, obviously, the experiences that we talked about pre-show, I mean, just you're growing up and so forth, being tough. I think, actually, that might be a title for this one, Being Tough. Yeah. I might think about that one. Being tough.
Somebody said something about being born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and I said that to my aunt, and she was like, "Well, Amy, you didn't come from good stock; you came from tough stock." And I was like, "I think I was born with a wooden spoon in my mouth and it had freaking splinters in it."
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the first, how long did you stay at Lifestyles? Because you've worked for a couple different brokerages over this.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was like 2 years or so, and then I went to work for Remax Specialists.
Okay. Was that so that by 2008 comes around, you're with Remax?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So one thing I always like to bring up on the show, and I think it's so important for new agents, someone thinking about being an agent, or even an agent who's hit a lid. Different brokerages had different values. They have different mindsets. We can go around town and think about the great brokers, and whether they're running a Keller Williams team or down below here at Round Table Realty, they run a different program and they add different value. And you've got to find the broker that matches the value with your need, right? In your experiences now switching,
I was with Lifestyles Realtors when I started, and then Remax Specialist for 5 years.
Okay.
Coldwell Banker for 8 years.
So you were there for quite a bit.
And I've been with Engel Völkers for 4.
4. So your changes, your reasoning for changes is my perception reality from the standpoint that the value was just not there at those brokerages, that you saw value somewhere else and needed to move? What was your reason for changing?
Well, I will say this. They're all good companies. And it does boil down to the local leadership and the culture in the local branch. Each office that I was at was exactly what I needed at that time. And I'm not one to hop around. When I get recruiting calls, the first thing I do is think, am I taking advantage of every opportunity in front of me? Because if I'm not, I have no business moving. I need to stay here and get to work.
Right.
But I left Remax Specialists to go to Coldwell Banker. I think Kim Knapp with Coldwell Banker called me and recruited me, and I went and talked to her and met with Pete Dalton. And it was just time. I felt like they had, at the time, it was their marketing and technology was better. So that's why I moved to Coldwell Banker.
So my perception is a little bit of reality. There was a value there because you reached a point in your career, and I think you stated that very well. You're at different stages. If you're a newbie, there are great brokers who can take someone off the street, totally green, and get them ramped up.
Yeah.
And then the question is, can they continue? They can only so many can continue in that atmosphere, in my opinion, because they become a leader. Well, there can only be so many leaders, from that standpoint. And then obviously people talk about their splits and so forth. But how do I, where do you want to go with your business? Because now you have more of an education of what the business is all about. Because I think the more you get educated, the more you're listening to podcasts, going to conventions, it expands your horizon of what real estate's all about.
Right.
And then you start going, well, where do I want to take my business? Do you want to be just a solo agent? Do you want to be a broker, or do you want to run a big team? Whatever that may be. We've talked about some of the challenges that you've had, the divorce, raising the kids. The kids are now
19, 20, 23.
Yes. So are they out of the house yet?
They're
trying to.
One at UNF. Yeah, everybody's out of the house, and yeah, I'm actually a grandmother now too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. You talked about podcasts. We talked about events. Is there any one particular person that you follow more than others, or do you bounce around just, for a little while? Like I found myself, I'll listen to somebody for a little bit, and then I'll get tired of them, and I'll find another one that'll just keep me going. Kind of like jumping brokerages in a little bit, but more in a rapid pace. I might listen to someone for 2 or 3 months or 10 episodes, but then okay, I've heard enough. Now I want to go somewhere. Is there anyone do you listen to particularly?
I'll listen to some motivational stuff, but I hired a business coach a while back, and she's out on her own now, has her own company, but I'll listen to a lot of Tom Ferry podcasts as he interviews other agents, because I can learn from the other agents.
Right.
Personally, I like Brene Brown type stuff. as I mentioned, Tony Robbins. I'm trying to think of what else.
You like people to kick you in the butt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I want fire and brimstone, I'll listen to Mike Ferry.
Okay.
You know who he is?
No, I don't.
Okay. He's like the hardcore preacher. You know,
Right.
you get out and do this. But yeah, I mean, I do that when I'm putting on my makeup and getting ready, and yeah, it kind of gives me a boost and helps me get my mindset right.
You actually brought something up, and we actually had talked about it on the phone yesterday morning a little bit, and then when I was doing my questions, I actually forgot to put it in here. But so I'm glad you brought it up. Coaching. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say every, most of your top people, because I imagine there are some people out there that have never hired a coach, but maybe they just had an internal coach, you know, a broker or some sort of mentor that was just as good as a coach, because wherever they were at. But how important has that been with your career? I mean, you know, where were you at when you hired them? Because I know you told me a little bit of story about borrowing some money to get to get the coach, and then how does that change your career?
It's changed my life.
Yeah.
Not just my career. Let's see. I hired my coach in February of 2016. And I never thought I could afford a coach. I could sell. I knew how to sell. I wasn't afraid of talking to people. You know, when I'm belly to belly with somebody and I can connect with somebody, you know, magic happens. But I did not know how to run a business. I mean, you get into real estate. Like, I took the real estate class. That teaches you enough basically to not walk out the door and say something stupid and get sued.
Right. Hopefully.
But, you know, there's so much more to it. You're not just a real estate agent opening doors. You are running a business. So so where was I during that time? Was that where?
Yeah, I mean,
what?
It sounds like basically where you just started in 2016, because I didn't know the date. You just brought up a coach the other day, and we're in talking about it. So you were kind of just, I wouldn't say, you know, going through the motion. You were surviving. Yeah. So, because at that point you'd been in real estate for 10, 11 years.
Yeah. So, you know, and if I can say this, you asked me to be on your podcast a number of times. And I kept saying, "Oh, I'm out of town. The timing's not working.
Yes,
timing's not working."
Excuses. I get those all the time, though.
I was making excuses, and yes, the other day when you asked me again, and I said, "Well, I'm actually going to be in Italy on October 5th.
Yeah.
Can't make it." And then I think I just said, "Tracy, I am apprehensive about being on your podcast. I have no problem sharing my story in front of thousands of people, as long as they're not in Jacksonville."
Right.
And you know, I had a lot of fear about being judged by my peers. And so in 2016, well, if I can start, because I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. People that know me in business are going to see this, but they don't know. You know, they just know what they see. And in 2011, you know, realtors work hard and we play hard.
Right.
And I think sometimes we get complacent or whatever the case is, but I had some life circumstances that I didn't have the courage to change, and I was just very unhappy with myself, and I basically was, you know, self-sabotaging or using poor coping skills. And in 2011, I got a DUI. In 2013, I got a DUI. So I had 2 DUIs in 18 months. And I found myself sitting in a courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit with shackles on my ankles, shackles on my wrist, turning around, looking in the back of the courtroom as my poor, sweet in-laws, my mother-in-law's crying and my father-in-law's mouthing, telling me to say no contest or whatever it was.
Right.
And I'm sitting in here going, holy, how did I get here?
Right.
I had a lot of shame around that for a long time, and I thought that my life was ruined. And I've been sober since January 25th, 2013. You know, sometimes the best gifts are wrapped in barbed wire. You know, and that was because I spent my life trying to be who I thought other people wanted me to be, and trying to fit in, and trying to be good enough, and trying to be smart enough. and it's just not sustainable.
Right.
You know? So that happened, and when that happened, I was selling real estate, had 3 kids, got that second DUI in January of 2013, and then on Valentine's Day, I was served with divorce papers. I had to figure out where I was going to live. I had an ankle bracelet. I'm still selling real estate. I still have 3 young kids. I'm straight commission, you know, and I'm broke. Broken, depressed, scared. Right. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was dealing with a 4-year divorce battle. I was on probation. I'm working at Coldwell Banker trying to keep this a secret. And there were a couple people in my life that, and thank God there were some really good people that I am forever grateful for at Coldwell Banker that knew. And one person in particular met me on a Saturday morning and sat across from me at a table, and I'm crying, you know, and just like my life is ruined. And he looked at me and said, Amy, you know what I see? I see a good person. And he believed in me and he helped me. And that was actually Pete Dalton at Coldwell Banker. But, you know, the following years, I'm on probation. I'm doing community service. Now I've got 2 mugshots. I'm trying to keep this a secret from all my peers. Nobody knows this. Right. And I still have to sell real estate. So without a car, somebody said, you know, and I had this ankle bracelet was $10 a day, and I had to wear that every day, and I had to pay, and it was to detect, you know, it checks your pH balance, and I had to go have it calibrated, and it was all this stuff, and oh my God. It was rough, and I ended up, lady said, call this lady, I think she can help you, and I ended up going to this home, and I started cleaning houses. So for someone who's driving the Mercedes, you know, that's got the diamonds and looking good, you know, showing up as a big real estate agent, now I'm showing up with a cleaning bucket and an ankle bracelet, and I'm on probation, and I'm scrubbing toilets. And there were a couple realtors, they didn't know why I was doing that, but they gave me work. So I was cleaning for a couple realtors. And then one of the first houses I cleaned was on Roscoe Road. It was a beautiful mansion. And I remember going in there, and I saw the lady that lived there, and a lot of this, like, our ego wants to tell us. Our ego can just get in the way. And in my mind, I'm like, I should be hanging out with this lady, not scrubbing her toilets. Right. And there was a RE/MAX real estate sign in the front yard, so her house was on the market, and I'm cleaning, and I was like, dear God, I hope there's not a showing while I'm here. And I cleaned for a long time. In February of 2016, I'm living in a little condo in Ponte Vedra, a tiny condo with my girls, and I needed to be close to a Publix. I needed to be close to their schools because I couldn't drive. Right. And my DUIs were pending for 2 years, so I didn't know what was going to happen. And I borrowed money to hire a business coach, and I borrowed money to pay my rent. And I'm not somebody that borrows money unless I need it. But I had to learn how to ask for help. I had to get rides for anywhere I wanted to go. It was tough. And when I had my first call with my business coach, I'm working at Coldwell Banker. I was in the Ponte Vedra office at that time. And when she called me, we were going to have our introductory call. And I walked out into the parking lot so nobody could hear me. And I didn't want the other realtors to know. And I said, well...
They're going to gossip anyway.
Yeah. I said, well, they can have at it now. I'm good. So on our first call, I said, well, I have a couple of challenges. I don't have a car, and I don't have a driver's license. And she was like, honey, how the hell have you been selling real estate? And I said, well, you know, I've been door knocking or whatever. So we worked on my mindset for a good while. And that's when I would get Uber to drop me off. I was cleaning houses so I could pay for Uber so I could sell real estate. And I was buying my clothes at Goodwill, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't a choice. That's what I had to do because I had to buy stuff for my kids. So I would get dropped off. I got dropped off in Isle of Palms. I got dropped off in Johns Creek. Wherever I could get dropped off, and I would have a bunch of business cards and a little notepad, and I would just go knocking door to door to door. And I'm like hot, and I'm sweaty, and I would not call to get picked up until I met my goal. And I started getting listings. I got a $600,000 listing. I started selling some real estate. And at the time, my coach was with Tom Ferry organization. And she called me and she said, Amy, Tom Ferry would like to have you speak on a panel, and they would like for you to talk about the benefits of coaching. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like me? So I went to Orlando, and it was called Sales Edge, and I'm sitting on a stage. I'd just been cleaning the day before. I'm wearing a dress from Goodwill. By this time, I have a car with a breathalyzer in it, like this, clunker of a car. And I'm sitting between Jeremy Cady, who was in my office. He had no idea. He was brand new, and he sold 70 houses his first year. The guy on the other side of me was making over $1 million a year. He lived in South Florida and had a yacht and all this stuff. And I'm just the cleaning lady in the middle, barely scraping by. Stuff starting to happen, but it wasn't, it was just starting to happen. And when I shared my story, and at that time, I just couldn't say 2 DUIs. I said 1. I still had to make it not so bad. And that helped remove a lot of the power that it had over me. And I looked down in the audience, and I'm like, oh my God, do they have allergies? Like, people are tearing up here. And people came up and talked to me afterwards. And so I'm doing all of that. And then I get to a point where still going through the divorce, stuff with my kids. I'm living in the little condo. And at 2 years sober, my attorney called me and let me know that my DUIs, it was supposed to be reduced to a reckless driving, and I would get to keep my driver's license, and I just had to keep doing all the things I was doing. And I was doing all the right things. And then he called back and said, hey, I don't know what happened, but it's you're going to need to be prepared to be sentenced when you go to court. So I went to court. My driver's license was revoked for 5 years. I had to pay thousands of dollars in fines.
This is 2 years after.
This was 20, I'm jumping around, 2015.
Yeah.
And 2016, I hired the business coach. So 2015, and I had to go check myself into the Duval County Jail and do that. And, there were consequences. And my license was revoked for 5 years. I was able to get a hardship license, but right. I was really I did not know how I was going to make it. And some days I just didn't want to get out of bed. But there was one time I was cleaning a house, and I never answered the phone when I was cleaning. But this time I answered the phone, and it was a past customer that I had shown homes to 5 years before that. And they were getting my monthly email greetings. Right. And she said, hey, Amy, do you remember us? You were showing us riverfront homes, and there's a house on the ocean that we'd like to buy. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
And now you're shaking, right?
but then I'm like, what if they want me to drive and I've got the breathalyzer? Right. So I met them, and I sold them $1 million house.
Awesome.
And eventually my coach was like, Amy, you're making over $100,000 a year now. How much longer are you going to clean houses? And I hadn't even thought about it. But all of these things, just my life kept getting better. And I still had to clean up the mess. I still had to clean up the wreckage. But I was forced to ask for help. I was forced to humble myself. I was forced to dig deep. I couldn't have the pretty mask on anymore. I just had to deal with life. And I ended up getting divorced. I had an opportunity to start.
This divorce was?
That was 2017.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And also, I was renting at the time, and this story I'll tell you really fast. I went on a listing appointment in 2006, and it was a duplex in Springfield. And the lady, I met with her, and she ended up not listing her place with me at that time, but she held on to my RE/MAX business card, which I still have the same cell phone number. That was 2006, and she called me in 2017 to come list a property for her. And I went and met with her, and I ran all the comps and did everything, and she said, I would consider owner financing, because at my age, I don't want to have to take a lump sum of cash and figure out how to reinvest it. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, maybe I can do this. And I asked her if she would consider it, and she said yes. At the time, my credit's not great. Right. Still don't have a lot of money. It was a miracle, but I gave her all my financials. I was completely honest. I was able to come up with 20%.
Was she living there?
No, these were her investment
properties. She would have had a tax ramification.
Yeah. So, yep. So I bought a duplex from her. Then I bought another house from her. Now I have a portfolio of real estate that So I am a full-time realtor, but I'm also a real estate investor.
Right.
And it is nothing short of a miracle and hard work, like luck and opportunity. And just, I was like, on the way here, I was like, thank you, God,
I'm trying to think of when hard work,
Yeah.
what's they meet, right?
Yes.
You have to, if you're sitting at home and you're waiting for the lottery to call you to say, hey, you chose the right numbers, which they're never going to do. You actually have to go down and check them. But you have to go out and create and be out there to create the luck. It just doesn't, I mean.
And you know what? If you don't ask, the answer is always no. If you don't ask, you don't know.
100%. You're inspiring. You're making me go into deep thought of just myself. The story is, I mean, I used the term rags to riches the other day, but literally some choices you made, as we all have made life choices. I really, truly believe, I've said this on the show before, we as humans deal with adversity throughout our lives, and just at different times. Mm-hmm. And you got punched hard in the stomach, you were down and out, and you refused to go down. And it goes back to, my wife does not like this scene when Rocky, where he's talking to his son, I think it was Rocky 5 or something.
Okay.
And he's talking about life. Life is, I'm going to paraphrase it, life is tough, and it's going to knock you down to your knees. Mm-hmm. And it's how does he say, it's, are you going to get back up and keep moving forward? Mm-hmm. And that's what you did. You are, I mean, that is your scene. we gotta figure out how to put that video together, because what Rocky is telling his son about, you were beaten down to your knees. I mean, I could see a lot of people at that point just like, I'm wearing the orange jumpsuit. My life is over. I'm now just going to go clean houses for the rest of my life. And that wasn't obviously there's people that make it into a big business. Yeah. There is a demand for that service, but that wasn't your service. You were doing it just to make ends meet, and you just, you got caught up in it. That wasn't your dream job or dream situation. And I imagine you probably never thought of, hey, I want to have 15 cleaning crews, and that wasn't your inspiration. You did it to survive. Mm-hmm. You obviously had the kids at the time that you're trying to, you made some statements to me the other day about basically, people helped you out to, save face in front of the kids, because kids are very impressionable. I hope today they have the utmost respect for you. I can, you don't know which way kids are going to turn, but I hope they, when they think of you, they're like, I got to be tough like my mom. And because that story, thank God no one died in the story here. That's positive in here. Yeah. But you were knocked to your knees. You were there. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some people probably may have even, I'd say it, probably might have even taken their own life. I mean, mm-hmm. you were in that kind of situation. It was tough. But you refused to be knocked down, and you stood back up, and that made all the difference. Mm-hmm. I always have to throw my Robert Frost in there. Yeah. Into that story. That is just, and I want what I was really thinking about when you were telling that story. Let's shrink that down to time. It's 2022. I mean, when you hit your lowest of your low, probably was when the and you can correct me, was probably when the lawyer told you had to come back into the courtroom, and then you had to check into the jail, right? That was probably could you have gone any lower than that? You know what I mean? As far as,
you can always go lower.
Well,
you can always go lower.
Yeah. So correct me.
And I was just thinking, I'm really big on mindset.
Yeah.
And when I spoke on stage at Woman Up, I talked about going to Rodeo Drive, and I bought the Louis Vuitton shoes, because if I'm going to step into thriving, I'm going to do it in these damn nice shoes, you know, stuff like that,
Right.
and having a mindset of abundance. And for me, it's not about the item, it's about the fact that I can do this myself and coming from a place of abundance.
Right.
But back to when I knew I had to go serve that jail time and the judge let me pick my date. So I had to coordinate people to watch my kids, like, you know, all this stuff. And they were still pretty young. Leading up to that, and I haven't watched the show since. I just can't. But I was watching Orange is the New Black on Netflix,
Right.
and I was watching what's her name, Piper, and that's like prison and it's reality TV. But I was like, I need to see how she's rolling in there, you know, And I can laugh about it now, but
Right.
I'll tell you, like trying to do all of this without people knowing. A few people knew, but there were times I was getting stuck. I was getting stuck in neighborhoods. I was stuck at the Coldwell Banker office because there was no Uber, and like it's
Well,
crazy.
there were so many times in your story there where, get the camera there. There's so many times in that story, so many people, I mean, if someone's watching you, if people knew, they're like, well, when's she going to give up? And now, that's why I asked you, were there times you wanted to quit real estate? I imagine there just that goes through people's minds, like, well, there's an easier road over here, I could just quit. And it sounded like that wasn't, I mean, imagine that thought went through your head at different times, like, how can I avoid, because you're like you said, you're dancing around, you don't want people to know, and you're getting the Uber. So many people would have, well, let me just go get the job over here and I'll just wait tables.
No.
And that way I'm not in front of my peers at the real estate office, that sort of thing. They would have chose that path. But you didn't. You didn't quit, and you kept moving forward. And that's what's so amazing. That's why you were on stage. I mean,
I'll tell you what, I love real estate because I love people. I love helping people. I do feel like this is my calling. I'm passionate about it. I'm good at it. And home ownership is so important to me. My family didn't own a home. We lived in a rental house. And the fact that I own all these rental houses now, like it's hard to even believe, like it's crazy. But the other thing is, and I used to talk to this lady, and every time we talk about something, I'd say, well, God, this, and, and I'm here because of this. And she'd say, Amy, you are so quick to take credit for all the bad stuff, but you don't take credit for the good stuff. You are where you are because of the choices you make. And I can say I am where I am, not because something was served up to me on a silver platter. I've had to scrape and work and hustle and humble myself and go through a lot of hardships to get to where I am today. And, I'm not going to waste the opportunities. And I feel like, at one time I was a mess in a dress. And now it's like my test has been turned into a testimony. And
that might be the title of this podcast.
Mess in a dress.
That would catch a lot of. I'll think about that.
Yeah. Well, one guy, when I was on the Tom Ferry stage, he was like, from Uber rides to Uber riches. And I'm like, well, I'm not Uber rich, but
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what else. Being grateful. Like when you have nothing, like I'm, getting home and praying my power's still on. I'm grateful for everything in my life.
Now the bill comes in, it's paid.
One of many.
Yeah. That there is for those who have gone through and been at a point where, you are, and I can roll through names that have been on this podcast that told me, the living the check to check, sitting there, balancing their check, you see people still do it today where everything's done electronically. You can just log in and has it all done for you, where, they're in there, can I write this check? When's this going to deposit? Or, that, and if you've been there and then you reach a point where you can go to Italy for a couple of weeks, you probably have already paid for everything already. Besides what you spend when you go there, the feeling to do that, and obviously, if you can take your kids or someone with you, that's even better. And just how the fresh air that blows through you when you know, having the Bennett zero to hero feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked, so I hear a lot of talk about Corey and Engel and Volkers. We're going to change gears here a little bit. So what is his magic sauce? Because I've heard numerous agents, been on the podcast and not on the podcast, something about when they sit down with him and he pitches a vision. Now, you've been with him for
I was agent number 4.
Agent number 4. Has his pitch changed? Has his vision cleared up a little bit? Or?
Well, I mean, we were just going to be a small group of realtors, I think, and now we have about 100, and I think we've got 5 offices now in just a short period of time. And I remember walking into his office, sitting down across from him, and I'm like, he's 28 years old, and he's doing this, and it's a big deal to move from I don't like to hop around.
Right.
So to leave the company I had been with for 8 years to join Corey was a big decision. But I could see, and he was like motivated and just ambitious. I knew he had something special. And the other thing, I had gone through a divorce and gone through all this. It was almost like that was the last piece of the puzzle, to have a fresh, new, clean slate. And I shared my heart with him. I shared some of my experiences, and he looked at me, and maybe it was like, damn, if she can do that, she might be able to sell a few houses. And he said, I want you to join us. And it has been the best decision ever. He's a dear friend of mine. I respect him. I love him. There's something magical about him, and he truly cares about people. He cares about his agents. The brand is top notch, and I only have good things to say.
It hasn't been a year yet. So I think it was November last year when I had him on. His sports background, some people get it, some people don't. Not him, but what they learned from that. Having the right coaches when he was younger, understanding what they were trying to do to motivate you, to get you to come out of your comfort zone and so forth. You're actually equal's not the best. You're not a nemesis. You're not an equal, but what you've gone through, the power that you, like you said, when you came out and started talking on stage, you were shedding that stuff that was holding you down, and you were throwing it to the side, and now you were more powerful. You had worked out so much, carrying this weight of your life, and now that you were able to toss it to the side, you were a much more powerful person.
Yeah.
And he is the same way, I think, from that standpoint of his athletic career and the challenges, and obviously to even just be considered and walk on an NFL field. His career was short, but he got there. And there's, you're going to get struck by, you're more likely to get struck by lightning, right?
Yeah.
To be a professional athlete. And he got there. And understand the adversity, and to be able to look back and understand why those guys told you to do so many push-ups, why they told you to run so much. When they told you to run another sprint and you're like, oh my God, I just don't have it in me. And I think that part of him, he sees in people, you saw in yourself. Like you said, you kept cleaning houses even though you're pushing 6 figures in an income. How many people would have done that? Most people would have dished the cleaning thing as soon as they had enough money in their positive in their checking accounts, and I'm done. Because, you know what I mean? But you kept keeping it humble and I think he goes back to his sports and athletic, and he humbles. And I don't hang out. You obviously you know him much more. I only spend an hour with him on the podcast. That's the only time but that's what I see coming through people that talk about him.
Yeah.
If I sum that all up. Sorry for my rant there. Okay. Who have been some, and maybe it might be your coach. Let's just talk about your 17 years in real estate. Who have been some key people that were there at the right time to keep you going in real estate and to get you where you are?
Oh my goodness.
If we can just call them out.
Yeah. Let's see. Doreen Peeler. was with Coldwell Banker, and she supported me during my difficult times. Ann Rain was one of my managers at Coldwell Banker. Pete Dalton, Kim Knapp with Coldwell Banker, Pam Henry, obviously my business coach. There was a guy named Philip that was a colleague in my office, and I shared with him what was going on, and he would give me rides and stuff like that. I've had so many people, and when you see somebody that's like working so hard, trying to do something different, you want to help them.
That's an excellent point. If I can harp on that, I always like to be inspirational, and I think this is a life lesson thing. I think most people want to help others, but what deters them is when they do give some charity or help to someone and they don't take advantage of it. Or, you give them some money and they go buy something stupid, right? And you gave so many people an opportunity. One, it feels good when you're able to share, which I'm sure you do today, to share and reach out and help someone. But you want them to grab your hand and allow you to help them. And if they don't grab your hand and go buy something stupid with the money you gave them instead of buying a meal for their kids, you can get discouraged from helping.
Yeah.
And I think all these people, I would imagine, going back and really talking to them, maybe having you on the podcast and asking, hey, what about Amy? Is they wanted to give you something because they knew if they gave you $1, you'd make $2 out of it. And that just made the difference for them. You still getting coaching today, or
Yes.
you still same person? Wow. Okay, so it was like 6 years. Now?
I took a break for a couple years. And we are back together.
Conversation's different though now.
She reminds me of when I'm hard on myself. She reminds me of where I was and where I am now. Because it's really only been since late 2018 that I was free to be able to work and drive and do all the things, and to build the real estate portfolio that I've built, to be in the top 500 agents in Northeast Florida, to be speaking on stages and traveling all over is quite incredible.
Yeah.
And I don't take the time to really look at that.
Well, that was what I wanted to get back before we kind of get off on this stuff is, when was that last time you had zero in your checking account? Was it 2018, 17? I mean, and then now we're only talking 4 or 5 years. And now you, I assume you own the home you live in, you own multiple other properties. You're going to Italy for a couple of weeks. It can change, and literally 4 or 5 years in our lifetime. I think after you cross over about 40, that's like overnight. 5 years goes by, boom, like that. Or when you have kids, 5 years goes by like, before the afternoon. And to look at anyone, you want to be inspired. If you're like Heather, who was on here on Monday, she's only 30 years old. She's already got 7 years in the business. A lot of trial and error, and she's now coming of age for her. If her podcast and listening to your podcast, it can be done. And if you want to be successful in 4 or 5 years, call Amy. She will put you on the road or tell you who you need to talk to if it's not her, right? That's what I see. Yes. All right. Now, let's talk about real estate specifically, because my next question, there was a lot of mistakes that were choices that you made, or whatever that you've owned up to. But as far as real estate, if you're talking to another real estate agent, new real estate agent, or maybe someone who's hit their lid, they've been doing it 3 or 4 years, don't know why the business is not growing. What is like one of the biggest mistakes in real estate? Whether it might have been marketing, what is something you would tell them, don't do this?
Oh gosh, don't do.
Or,
Well,
or you did it and it was worthless? I would highly suggest that.
Well, I will say early on, I spent a lot of money on shiny objects. There is no magic pill. You have to pick up the phone. You have to you have to lead generate somehow. Figure out what you're good at. What's your magic, and do that. You know, for me, it's I don't like the long incubation period of internet leads, because I like to build rapport with people. I like to build relationships. It's hard to do that when you're just texting and sending emails. I'm a people person, and I think for me, getting in front of people, I do well at open houses. I do well at networking and just really building relationships, and everybody can be your customer. You know, whether it's a plumber that you have that came over to your house, it's a handyman that you hired, it's the dentist, it's, you know, doesn't matter. And I have to tell you something. This was like, I was like, holy cow, my life has come full circle. I'm working with a police officer right now. And a couple weeks ago, we were sitting across from each other at a table, and she's in her full uniform with, like, you know, her whole deal. And I'm like, I'm selling this lady a house. I'm not sitting in the back of her police car. Life is damn good. But anyway, yeah, just, you know, build relationships. Don't think that there's a magic bullet. Work hard, work smart. You know, you can, there are things that you can do. And I think identifying what your strengths are. Also, educate yourself. That's huge. You know, we're handling the largest transaction that most people will make. And I consider it an honor every time I'm invited into somebody's home, because they are inviting me into their home, their finances, their family. I get to see what's going on behind the scenes, and that's not something to take lightly. I would rather sell less houses, but make an impact in somebody's life and serve them at the highest level.
You bring up, which I think our industry is now in a gut check time, because this is how you've been doing your business. The shiny object. That is there's so many out there. We get them. I mean, because we are in the business we are, you open Facebook, you're going to have an ad for that another shiny object. Do you want to buy leads, or do you want this, you know, given, you know, hey, give us money here, give us money there. And the reality is you have to, however it is, whether it's you'll have someone dial for you, a virtual dialer, to make the appointments I utilize a little bit because they can sit there and dial a lot more people, because there's creative things that I do from social media. There's things that I'm good at. We all have call reluctancy. If you have call reluctancy, find someone to make the dials, because you need to make the dials.
Yeah.
The dials have to be made. It could be just to your past clients, just reminding them that you're still there and you're still doing the business. But like you said, you know, creating the relationships. There's no shiny object that's going to create the relationships. You may find a shiny object that creates the initial interaction. I use the podcast for that. But after that, it's now building. You have to, you know, what's the follow-up? What are you doing next? And that you've been doing that all along, and I think that's why you're going to plow through. Which you know, everyone says we're in a recession now, whatever. But it's a downturn in our industry versus what it was a year ago, which was a huge upturn. So you know, things are changed, but you're going to plow right through it because you've been doing the foundation all along of the relationship building, making the calls, door knocking, etc. You mentioned education already. Just tip on, if you could, how important is it for a new agent to ramp up today and grab, whether it's at the Board of Realtors, whether it's at a sponsored event, you know, there's so many places where someone's talking today in real estate. Just in Jacksonville, I guarantee we search around, there's a lot of them we don't even know about, that where someone's giving out some expertise. You know, how important is it for them to absorb that and put that into their schedule to make sure they are educating themselves on the industry?
For me, it's crucial, because we're being hired as an advisor, as the expert in our field. And if you know how, like, you know, if somebody starts like I did, and they know how to sell, but they don't know how to run a business, take some classes, you know, take some business classes. And I took the GRI course because it gave me kind of a full picture of real estate. You know, the continuing education, I'm part of many investor groups and Airbnb groups, and I travel to different conferences, and I talk to agents that are, that have what I want, that are doing things at a high level. I've done a lot of, just the stuff that I've learned from my purchasing real estate. I have self-directed IRAs. I have a lot of owner finance deals. I've done the BRRRR method, buy something, fix it up, refinance it. Mm-hmm. So, and all of this has just been in the last, since 2017, 2018.
Right.
So you have to be able to bring value into a situation and be confident about what you know. How do you set yourself apart from thousands of other agents? So I am an expert in my field. This is not a job, it's my career. And it's my job, it is my responsibility to keep up with what's going on in the market.
You bring up a good point about running, the coach, it's your business, right? Yeah, you're under whatever brokerage. Today it's Engel and Völkers. Yeah, they are who you shine under and so forth, and where you hopefully pull value, like from Corey and some of the other great agents. But the reality is you're 1099. Mm-hmm. You have your own expenses. You got to pay for your own education.
Right.
They're not paying for your, unless, I'm sure they provide stuff in the office occasionally. But the reality is you got to go out and beyond that. They're not going to be able to provide you the education you need if you're going beyond being you could be a full-time part-timer. In other words, it's like hey, I just want to sell a house or two a month, right? If that's kind of your attitude, and then which that turns out to be a house every other month, mm-hmm. Because you set your bar so low, mm-hmm. or you want to do X amount of dollars because you want to sell so many houses because you want this volume, and so you need to make this many calls, and you need to do that. I'm sure your coach went through all that math to figure out, hey, this is what you need to be doing on a daily basis. So that's your bar that you need to try to reach to every day to stay on pace to reach where you want to reach. And part of that is educating. I'm sure today I'm listening to you. Anyone comes up to you and starts talking about real estate, like I've been doing this. I've been in mortgages as long as you've been in real estate. Someone asks me a question, even if I don't know the answer, I can not lie to them, but I can give them enough that tells them that I know what I'm talking about. And I know where to get the information. You know what? I haven't ran across that. There's so many different loan programs. I know there's something like that exists. Let me go research it, because it is a one-off product. It's something, or you're talking the BRRRR method. These are common things that are out there, but very rarely used, right? You've done it. You're part of it. Your confidence, sweats out of you. It's out and around you, and people see that. And obviously why your sales probably continue to increase, because even just the basic sale of a single-family home, you're coming in there with all the confidence, and people are attracted to that, mm-hmm. 100%. So consistency is another common thing. What would you say in your business, whether it's something you've been doing for 17 years or something you've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, where you came from, that you feel that you do consistently because it moves the needle in your business?
Build relationships, make contacts.
Expand on that. So what does that mean to you?
I try to reach out to stay in touch with people that I've done business with. They already like me, know me, and trust me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to, Sunday I'm going to lunch at a past customer's house. At 1 o'clock I'm going to a baby shower at a past customer's house. I had dinner with 2 past customers last week. I bought a couple of wedding presents yesterday. I mean, it's not just a real estate transaction. It is a relationship. And to me, it's such an honor to be part of somebody's life journey. One little side note, during COVID, in between snacks, I decided to get my little notary certificate. So I became a notary, and I went to see my hairdresser, and she was like, hey, aren't you a notary? And I was like, yeah. And she said, can you officiate a wedding? So I ended up officiating her wedding. I sat down, and we went through their vows, and I talked to them, and there were probably 100 people on the river at this wedding. And I did it.
Wow.
And then I have another customer. Great. I sold her first house.
You don't advertise that service, though.
I don't. And I officiated her. But it's not about money. No. That's how much I care about the people that I'm privileged to be in relationship with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just, taking care of people, staying in touch with people, and continuing education. And obviously, you got to work. You got to work.
I want you, because of your consistency, it's risen to the level of, what do they call it? Officiating a wedding? Is that, what do they call that?
Yeah.
What's the term? Something like that.
Yeah.
That's like high level. Like, and most people are like, oh my God, I can't do that. No, you don't need to do that.
No, you do not need to officiate weddings. Please do not.
You need to keep the basic level. So for you, what are you routinely doing? I mean, is it birthday cards?
Yeah.
Is it a call every couple of months? Or what are some basics that you keep there?
Phone calls, visits, dinners, going to people's homes, letting them know that I care.
Well, the going to people's homes probably for most people didn't happen overnight, but you were calling, sending them a birthday card and whatever, and then ran into them at the grocery store, and they're like, yeah, you go to come, you know what I'm saying? That takes time.
And the thing is, they feel like they owe me. Like, they're like, we're so sorry we haven't invited you over. We haven't made you dinner. I'm like, they think that they need to give me a gift.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's that's awesome. Consistency in relationships. I mean, that's the foundation of our business. How important, and because you're with Engel and Völkers, and I know Corey, he talks about it when I interviewed him a year ago, and now you guys have added more locations. They like to have that office where it's an attraction where you want to bring your family to, because it's impressive, just the way it's laid out in decor. So this question here, I know, I assume is going to flow through you, and that's showing up. Mm-hmm. Showing up at the office, showing up at the social, showing up at that baby shower. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I guarantee there's going to be talk, there's going to be somebody in that room that doesn't know you, and now you're going to be able to tell them, because what's an easy conversation? What do you do for a living, right?
Right.
And that conversation starts. How important is it showing up?
To me, it's very important. When I am invited to something, I say yes as often as I can. Because if you don't, you're not going to get invited anymore. But I like to have good relationships with the people, the other realtors, and my colleagues in my office. So I'm building those relationships. I'm building relationships with people that I do cross sales with, and just if you say you're going to be there, be there. I'm not in the office every day, but when we have an event, when we have a social event, I try to show up to those as often as I can, and just, be a participant.
Well, you guys have a lot of, you have to be at a certain level already to go to Engel and Völkers. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of smart, intelligent people that are there, and it's going to bleed over to you. Yeah. And it's all that's part of the surrounding yourself by 5 people, going to your office and like being within earshot or interacting with the top agents in your office. That's part of that 5 people you're surrounding yourself with. Mm-hmm. It's right there. You just got to walk in. We already talked about surrounding yourself with successful people, so I'm not going to beat on that one anymore. All right. This is your sales pitch, right? This is your reel that we cut out.
Oh, gosh.
All right, I'm going to put the camera just on you.
Oh.
What makes Amy Powell a unique real estate agent that people should be using her?
I'm extremely knowledgeable in my field. I have a lot of life experience and a lot of business experience. Because I worked through the downturn of the market, because I've made financial mistakes and gone through all those types of hardships, I know what it's like, and I know how to protect my clients, and I know how to keep them on track. If they tell me what their budget is, I'm going to try to help them stay in their budget, because I know what the flip side of that is. Mm-hmm. I am persistent, tenacious, gritty. Like, I will do whatever the hell I have to do to get the job done, and do it well, and do it with a smile. So if somebody hires me, like, they're going to get the full package.
Okay. When you're telling that story, and I'm just thinking about our whole conversation here for the last hour, some people may be able to relate to this story. But for some reason, it flashed in my mind. If you've ever watched the movie Band of Brothers, the HBO series, where it talks about America's U.S. First Division landed in Normandy and made it all the way to Germany. And there's a scene in the movie, in one of the episodes, where the lieutenant, the men are told to follow this guy, and he's kind of real short in conversation, but he's a man's man. He's like 6 foot plus, whatever. He's literally running across the field. There's machine gun fire and everything coming at him, and he makes it. He actually goes through the Germans, turns around the others, and obviously is fighting from the other side. And that's what, when you were going through that, made me that's you in real estate to me. That was the analogy that I could put you have had all these bullets flying at you for a good part of your life. At different stages when you were young, and maybe there was a period of time when you were married and had the kids. There was some peace, but then then it started again, and you have come through that, and now you are just that much better on the other end. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I should be a poet.
Poet, you didn't know it. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna wind down here because we've been going here a good bit, and what a great story. These are my standard questions. What is Amy's favorite thing to do in Northeast Florida when she's not selling real estate?
It's so simple. I love to just walk on the beach. Sounds cheesy, but that's where I feel grounded and kind of connected to nature, and I'm present in my body.
Are you listening to anything, or you like to hear the waves?
Sometimes I listen to things, yeah, but then it just depends. It seems kind of silly if I'm listening to something because I can hear the sound of the ocean and just take all of that in and shut out the noise. But
I do believe in Billy Wagner. I got his book right here in front of me. He talks about how his routine is 6:30 in the morning. He gets the dog, and he'll listen to a podcast or an audible book or something for 40 minutes of that hour that he goes out. But there's 20 minutes where he turns off the ear pods or whatever, and he's allowing his thoughts and things to arrange themselves in his mind.
Right.
And I think people miss that part of that life. Some of the greats talk about meditation and so forth, and that's what to me, that's what they're doing. And when you say you want to walk on the beach, that silence or just hearing the waves, you're allowing your mind to catch up to you.
Yeah.
And then put your goals. All right. Question I've asked on every one of the 94 podcasts: is it more important who you know or what you know, and why?
Woo! Who you know. To me, who you know can help you connect with what you need to know. And in my world, relationships and treating everybody well is why I think I'm so successful. And I don't just mean in business, but just I have good relationships and I value those relationships.
And in some of those people, because you told you had numerous people that reached out in your time of need because you asked and you were a willing recipient of their a gift or whatever it was. But when you gain confidence too, and people say, you know what, I gave Amy $1, she returned $2. They now want to then even share more with you. They want to, hey, whether it's in business or whatever, it's not, I'm breaking it down very simply. But what I'm hearing you say is they wanted knowing the right people, respecting them, showing them respect. When they gave you $1, you returned $2. They just want to pour more into you and show you. And obviously, hopefully you're finding successful people that are guiding you in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
100%. I totally agree with that statement that you just made, Amy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
having
much.
you on. I think this goes down in one of the top things. Hopefully, many of the people that were at the California comp listen in, that see your name out there, or Google your name and see how you're doing. And hopefully the podcast will go up for them, because I think, there's a lot of people can relate to your story. We've all been kicked in the teeth sometime, and you have risen above and beyond, and I mean, the sky's the limit.
Well, and if I can just say, I'm so glad that I finally ripped the Band-Aid off. Like, I'm sitting here now, and I'm really not afraid of who might see this, where I was before.
You're not shaking as much as you were.
I was
earlier.
shaking when I got here. I was shaking when I got here. But if I can say to anybody, it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter how bad you think you've screwed up your life. You have, every day is a new day to
100%.
do something
I was just about
different.
to say, the sun rises and it's a new day.
If you woke up breathing today, it's a damn good day. Don't
Yes.
waste it.
Yes, 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.